sleepless nights, overwhelming stress. This is a caregiver's reality. And how do we hold the weight of caregiving, parenting, survival while still trying to find moments of rest, hope, and meaning? And these are the questions that so many of us live with every day. And my guest today is Andrea Suchin, a caregiver advocate, an entrepreneur, and the co-founder of Wuggle. Her journey began when her husband, a Harvard-trained physician, was diagnosed at just 54 with behavioral frontotemporal dementia. And overnight, she became his full-time caregiver while raising their 4 children. This life-altering shift gave her an intimate understanding of what stress, anxiety, and sleep loss can do to both caregivers and families. And born out of exhaustion and the need for comfort, became a story of resilience. And I cannot wait for you to hear from Andrea about Wuggle, what they're doing, her story, the transformative work that they're doing in collaboration with many different organizations, and exploring how better sleep can transform the caregiving journey. Here is my interview with Andrea Suchin. Hi, Andrea. We
Hi,
get to be
Nicole.
together. I'm so excited. We've met. Oh my gosh, how long ago did we meet? I love we've have similar connections and friends in
Yeah,
the caregiving space.
yeah.
So
Imagine Darling, Patty, Dr. Falzerano. I mean,
I
the list
know.
goes on. Incredible women, incredible community.
Yeah, it's
And
just
that's how
such
we
a
met.
pleasure. I
So,
know.
and so thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you and sharing this journey and hopefully be able to help others.
Absolutely. Honored to have you. And I was telling you earlier, I'm like, I'm just excited. We get to visit and catch up
Yes.
even as colleagues and
Yeah.
friends and be able to have you share your story with all of us, which I know is so important. In
Yeah.
fact, people don't know this, but we were supposed to record a little bit ago,
Yeah.
and the timing, your husband had passed, and I said, I reached out and I was like, I'm thinking of you, and we're going to take a rain check.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
focus
Right.
on.
Right, which I was just saying to myself before was I if you hadn't said that, your brain is just not in the right place. And if you had said, "Oh, do you want to meet?" I probably would have said, "Oh, okay." It was like I was letting you tell me what to do because I really don't the grief and everything I was going through was so overwhelming. So
Right.
thank you for giving me that pause,
Mm,
and I was able to reflect, and we can meet today, which is, I'm a little bit stronger. So better
absolutely.
place today.
Oh, I know we're holding you in that. We
Thank
are.
you. Yeah, you guys were all amazing to me.
I am really happy that you can share your experience with us. I think that we learn from each other, we connect from each other, we find strength in each other. And you've taken what you've walked through and now have this beautiful mission.
Mhm.
So, beginning of your story, I would really love for you to share about uh,
Sure.
your
Yeah.
story, the beginning of it, what you realized
Yeah.
maybe things weren't quite right with your
Yeah.
husband, Craig.
Sure. So yeah, so it was interesting. Everything kind of spiraled during COVID, which was
Mhm.
in a sense a blessing because he was home and I was able to start seeing that his behavior was changing. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it's because he's home and he's bored. And he was a surgeon. He was an interventional radiologist. He had his own practice. He had gone to Harvard Medical School. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. Things were off, maybe kind of more of an OCD behavior. Constant packages were arriving with shaving
Mm.
and shaving kits and creams. And later I come to find out that with a diagnosis of FTD, compulsive shaving is actually one of the symptoms, which I had no clue. He went on kind of extreme exercising for 6 hours, and then stopping and then going back another 4 hours, and it was just this compulsivity over this period. And then his behavior started. I noticed that he didn't want me to cook for him anymore. I would find almost, I can't even explain it, but I mean, I can explain it that he basically would eat 8 bananas and 8 bars and 8 apples, and I would find them all over in the bathroom, in the kitchen, and I mean, it was compulsive eating, and I had to actually hide the food. So we have a whole, I have four children, and at the time they were nine, I think 9, 13, 17 and 19. And my daughter had come home from college, and she said to me, "Mom, what's going on here? Dad is acting crazy and you're not doing anything." And I said, I think I was just numb. And I said, "Yeah, no, I know something's not right." And he was also a diabetic, so we had chalked it up to, oh, he's going through maybe some diabetic issues. And then the rage started. And we called them episodes. And he would stand at the bottom of the stairs in the morning, screaming his head off. "What am I doing? What am I doing today? What am I doing?" And then he would tell me he didn't know what to wear. What do I wear? What do I wear? And then what do I eat? Do I shower? And it was like he couldn't function. And then we ended up, because he was a doctor, he was allowed to go back to work. And so I thought, okay, maybe he'll get better. And one day I just remember he left for work, and I called him and I said, "Craig, did you mean to leave your breakfast?" And he said, "No, I ate it." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I thought, he's having some neurological issues. And so it kind of just went from these episodes of screaming to hitting himself. I would put the kids in the car and leave the house because I was so scared of his behavior. The compulsive eating, and rages and crying and fits, and couldn't find his phone, and it just went on and on. And so finally, I called a therapist that we'd worked with, and he's like, "Oh, he's fine. This is what he does." I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is what he does. This is a man who's the kindest, most beautiful man. This isn't who he is." And the doctor didn't want to listen to me. And then I called his internist, and his internist didn't want to listen to me. And the other thing that was happening is that he was checking his blood sugar not every 5 minutes, but every 3 seconds. And he had an Apple Watch on, and it was so compulsive that it was scary. It was like, wow, he can't stop looking at his watch. And so my daughter and I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is diabetic rage. And so we got him a lady who helped him with OCD and kind of retaught him the diabetes and how to control it. And he was asking me, how much insulin should I give myself? How much should I dose myself? And I'm thinking to myself, this is a brilliant man. Why is he asking me how to treat his diabetes? So when finally there was a day where he had to go get a COVID shot and for work, and he drove home and he called me and he was hysterical. I mean, the scariest moment of my life. And I was watching him drive on the 360, and I could see he was going 80 miles an hour, and he finally got home, and I got in the car to make sure nobody was on the road by our house. I mean, I was just very scared for him. And when he pulled in, he was having an episode, and within 5 minutes he was fine. And I thought, okay, this isn't okay. And so I did something I didn't want to do, but I taped him, and I taped him having an episode, and I sent it to his doctor, and I said, "My husband either has a brain tumor, Alzheimer's, or dementia. You need to do something." And the other doctor, the therapist we had originally spoken to, said, "Oh, he's having seizures." I said, "This is not seizures. He can't remember things. He's having erratic behavior." And at this time, my sister was helping me, Hillary, and she spoke to her friend who's a neurologist, and I spoke to him, and basically, I knew before the doctors, by speaking with his doctor, that he had behavioral FTD. I mean, he checked every box. And thank God for the internet, right? We can research and do these things. And so I really pushed the doctor, that day, and I said, "No, you need to take this seriously." And so we were very lucky. We got into John Hopkins This is
Yeah.
during COVID still, so we were able to do this over Zoom. We met with Dr. Hill, and he did all the tests. She did all the testing, and an hour later, 5 minutes later, she says, "Yeah, your husband has behavioral FTD." And
Mm.
he is 54 years old at this time. So this was almost a 2 year process. So at 54, he was finally diagnosed. Um, she, was amazing, but she called me up personally the next day and said, "You have two jobs. You get him medicated, and that will help with the symptoms, but you have a long road ahead of you, which is you need to keep him on a schedule and keep his anxiety low and keep him calm. Or you're going to have these episodes where he's just, even on medication, he's going to be erratic." And so, my whole family, we lost my kids lost their father at that point. I lost my best friend. I lost my dreams, our hopes, raising children together, grandchildren, trips, all these things we wanted to do. It was gone. I remember being in the laundry room folding laundry, and I was speaking to a friend of mine whose husband died, and he had dropped, unfortunately, dead of a heart attack. And she said, I'd rather have gone through what I went through than what you're about to go through. And she was right. I mean, we talked afterwards, and she didn't get to say the goodbye. I got to say my goodbyes, which was very important. But so through this process, I stopped sleeping. I went into survival mode. I had to figure out he needed to stop working. He couldn't see patients. He had to stop driving. I mean, I took this man's life away from him, not intentionally, but I had to. And I was and it was a lot of verbal abuse because he was very sad and upset, and I had a lot of patience because I knew this poor man, this is not what he would have wanted for himself. And so um I made the decision that we were going to stay for at least a year in the house. But as I started doing research, and I had to learn about Social Security disability, which they turned me down the first time because a terminal illness as FTD is obviously not serious enough. And I had to learn long-term disability, and I learned to pay the bills, and I learned to basically work the medical system. I mean, all these things I didn't know about. And once you go on long-term disability, you have to see the doctors every 3 months, to show proof that they're still sick. And for me, that came out of pocket because we lost our house. I sold our house. I literally had to give up our house, because I knew that at a certain point, his treatment could be 10 to 13,000 a month if I had to get a caregiver, if I had to place him. Um, and I had four children to support still. And so it was very, very scary. And the stress, I stopped sleeping. I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night. I felt like my brain was on fire constantly. I felt this survival mode, kick in. I don't know how I knew how to do these things. I just did them. I met an incredible woman named Rachel Bloom who became my right-hand woman. We spoke every day because her husband, unfortunately, we met, and then about 3 months later, he passed away from Alzheimer's as well. Uh, it was hard. I felt very alone. I wouldn't say I lost friends. I think that they just went away, and there's something to be said where you want this to be private. This is a very, hard thing. This isn't the Craig everyone knew. And so I was very protective over him. And, I had a couple of very good friends who, I let in, but otherwise, I had my sister and my family, and I decided to move. So, packed up, basically got rid of 75% of my house. Everything is still in storage. We had hoped that we were going to move from Maryland to LA and live with my parents for maybe 6 months. It's been almost 3 years. I couldn't, I just, between taking care of him and the medical bills, and my father became a care, um, care partner with me. He's 80 years old, helping me with my husband, who's 54 years old. And, I mean, it was, and four kids in their home, and my mom is helping me, and so it just kind of became like we all partnered together to take care of this man, who we all love. And so um, it was not easy. And, the last, I guess 2 years ago, probably about 18 months ago, is when I decided, I need my sleep and I need to do something about that. And so I started put, I'm up taking care of him. I'm, managing the bills. I'm managing him. I'm taking care of the kids. And, we had pretty much got him to a point where, I think when you have behavioral FTD, there's only so much you can do. You need to find a really good geriatric psychiatrist. That's number one, because a medication is key to all of this. Craig ended up on 5 different medications. I would like to see, I wish that the doctors would do maybe a genetic testing to see what medications are really
Mhm.
going to work for that individual, because I think that we spend a lot of time trying this one and this one and this one, this medication, and we waste a lot of time. So I think there needs to be more. First off, I feel like the doctors didn't listen to me. They didn't believe me because he was so young. And
Mhm.
when I read about the diagnosis of FTD, they say it takes 2 years,
Mhm.
right? Because they say, oh, they're manic, they have bipolar, they this, there's always an excuse because this person is too young.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see more doctors kind of on that. Maybe we should look into the FTD. And so, we found a wonderful neurologist here, and, he couldn't do much. It was like, okay, you have the diagnosis. This is what it's going to be. We were managing his diabetes. I had him on a pump, the Dexcom. So I was monitoring his, his insulin intake. And I could, and the problem with that is, I will tell you, is um, the company Dexcom and Omnipod are great, but they will not let the caretaker control the diabetes, the insulin. Yes.
Interesting. Wow.
So,
That needs to be a shift too, right?
yes, and I called multiple times, and what happened with Craig over the period of time is that when you have dementia, he would switch himself from automatic mode into manual mode.
Mm.
Right? So I would have to switch him back into automatic mode. And so when you have, and I explained that, I said, when you have a patient with dementia, they don't know what they're doing with their phone and passwords, and they didn't want to listen to me, and that was really aggravating. And I would have my phone turned on, so I would hear it beeping, 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 and I knew that he was changing, his device, and so there was a lot of back and forth with that, and that made it even more exhausting with this. So you had behavioral FTD plus the diabetes. It was overwhelming. So about, I say, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I started, we go into my kind of advocating, and what can I do to help myself but help others. And so one night I started, I put pillows over my head, and I was wrapping my head with blankets because my head hurt so much. And one night my daughter bought me a blanket, I wrapped it, and I slept. I slept 6 hours. And I was telling my sister, who's also my care partner, and she says, well, I think, one of my daughter and I, Talia, who sews, come over, and we started cutting up t-shirts and blankets, and Talia's sewing this, and we made this kind of sleep cap, and Talia says, I want to snuggle with my Wuggle. And I said, oh my God, what did you just say? And Wuggle means to hug and to cuddle. And I said, Talia, that's what every caregiver needs.
Oh my
We
goodness.
need a hug and we need a cuddle and we need calmness. And so it kind of spiraled with this advocating of me saying, I want to give back and help other people sleep. And Hillary and I started Wuggle together, and we found this, organic micromodal fabric and a spandex and Sapima cotton, and we wanted it to be natural. And we started doing prototypes, and I started handing them to doctors, the neurologists and the geriatric psychiatrists and therapists. And I'm getting phone calls and emails. I need 5 more. I need
Wow.
3 more. And I thought, I think we have something here. And so we started Wuggle with this intention of helping other caregivers, and that's my goal. And we have found, though, people with anxiety and stress and ADHD, traveling,
Mhm.
um, migraines. We designed it so that, you can put this warm compress of lavender rice insert in with, you
Mhm.
make it hot or cold. And it was just overwhelming. And we have sold almost 600 just by word of mouth.
Amazing.
And we work with this wonderful man named Greg Hill, and he works with me as a mentor. He says,
Mm,
I know you're starting out, and I know you don't have the money, but I believe in this product and I believe in your story.
mhm,
And he says, I want to help you. And we were all talking, Hillary and I and Greg, and we started getting Wugglers who
mhm.
were telling us on their Aura ring, oh, I'm going from 4 hours a night to 8.5 hours of night. And these were caregivers.
Yeah.
And so my daughter Morgan, who is very involved in Lorenzo's house, and my son Maxwell, who sits on the junior board for HFC, and also worked for Betsy Hall for their thoughts. They said, "Mom, you should get in touch with HFC and Lorenzo's and and Patty." And so we have now partnered with these incredible nonprofits, and we give back money, and every Wuggle we sell, we give back to help with grants.
Mhm.
Um, and then my daughter calls me up one day and she says, Mom, there's this doctor at USC, Dr. Falzarano. You should reach out to her. And
Love her.
and I randomly call this number at 7:15 in the
Mm.
morning, and I leave a message, and next thing you know, I'm speaking with Dr. Falzarano, and we're like, as you know, bonded with this grief that we've
Mhm.
experienced as caregivers. And she's, obviously with the Falzarano Family Caregiver Lab. And I said, hey, would you be interested in doing a sleep study with me? And so
Incredible.
yeah, and so we are now on phase one, where we have our Wegglers who caregivers going to be, kind of doing a quantitative study of them, and how they, how their Weggle has helped them. And then we're going to move into phase two, which is going to be that we're going to donate 50 Wuggles to caregivers, and we're going to do a study with them. And then our dream is that we move on to phase three, which will hopefully be that scientific data, whether it's, through some kind of sleep app, right? Where we can say, hey, this is really the proof, and we've been so blessed. And I don't know if you know Debbie Elkins, she's an AFTD ambassador, and
Mhm.
she called me personally, and she was the one who said, look, I want to show you my Aura ring, and look at this. I've gone from 4 hours to 8.5 hours. And people call me and say, I have to keep the light on all night because my husband can't sleep with the light off. So I put my Wuggle on. And so, that when I think I'm just so tired, I go, nope, this is because we need to do this. We need to help because our health is so important. If we aren't taking care of ourselves, how are we supposed to be caregivers?
Mhm.
And, I had some health issues, and I will share that later,
Mhm.
towards the end of Craig's life. And it really is my passion. It's in my heart. I said to my sister 2 years ago when we started this, I won't do this unless we give back. I
Yeah.
said, because I don't have the energy to do it unless
Yeah.
we give back. And that's what motivates me, is to make a difference in caregivers' lives and anyone's life,
Yeah.
for that matter, and to really, make a difference. And so, Craig was always, even though he had dementia, he knew about the Wuggle. He was always so proud of me. I
Mm.
didn't give him a Wuggle because he had sundowners, and I didn't want to confuse him even more.
Mhm.
Like, could fall or something out of bed. He was sometimes unsteady. And
Mhm.
so, and now that I have experienced the caregiver, the frustration of
Mhm.
what is wrong with my loved
Mhm.
one, going through the 4 years, and
Right.
then the end was pretty brutal. I would say that I would like to see our community kind of prepare us a little bit more for this end. I will share, on a Thursday, I had to have some surgery. I had a stent. I had some kidney stones. Fine. I handed him over to a caregiver that I had hired the few weeks before, only because my son said to me, Mom, you need a caregiver to come in while you're having your own health issues. Mom, you need to go pick a plot for dad. No, I
Mm,
don't. Mom, you need to prepare yourself. This is my 19-year-old telling me this, the one who's on the Lorenzo's house. I'm sorry, the one who sits with HFC youth board and worked also for their thoughts. And he is so in touch, right? And and so he, even though I was so prepared, nothing can prepare you for when it happens.
yeah.
I called his nurse practitioner, I called his doctor, I called hospice.
Mm,
Um, so on Thursday, I had the surgery. I was in bed. I was in horrible pain. By Sunday, I was out of bed and I was able to feed him. I was able to bathe him. I gave him his medication. And it was the first time I was able to physically get out of bed.
mhm,
And the caregiver had said he's not doing great. He's not doing great. He's having some problems swallowing, and he
mm,
seems very out of it. He's kind of throwing up. Things like that. He
mm,
had incontinence, and it was a whole thing. And so by 9 o'clock, my son said, "Mom, he doesn't seem like he's going to make it another week." And I said, "Oh, stop it. Yes, he is. He's
mhm,
fine." And I said, "No, no, he's fine. I'm up now. I can take care of him." And he said, "How long are you going to do this for?" And I said, "I'll do this forever. He's my husband." And then I think at around 9:30 that night, I knew
mm,
he was transitioning.
mm,
There was a lot of things that had happened, kind of, I think, that end of life that you see. And he had been in the hospital in November, and they told me that if he stayed in the hospital, he was going to die there,
okay.
and that there was nothing they could do for him.
Mhm,
And because he was so agitated, they had to give him such high doses
mm, mm,
of medication that aren't good for people with dementia.
yeah.
So it was kind of like, what do I do here? Right.
Right,
And
right. Were you
and
set up with hospice at that time yet or not?
so
Officially?
that was where I feel that I wish I had been set up with hospice. So hospice was coming the next day.
Mm,
Hospice was coming at 10:30 a.m.
mhm,
He passed away at 6:48 a.m. I called hospice probably 10 times during that night. So from 9:30 till the time he passed away, I
mhm,
made multiple phone calls to try to get somebody to come. And
mhm,
so, I didn't have any medication. I mean, I was under I was under the assumption that if I could get somebody and maybe we could ease his comfort, make him more comfortable. I did the best I could. And I read somewhere, or I saw on Instagram, when somebody is dying, that you want to stay calm and
mhm,
that you want them to transition, peacefully. And I did. For 8 hours, I stayed calm, and
mhm,
um I made sure he was falling out of bed. I stood by the bed for hours. I moved by his feet.
mhm,
I held him, I helped him. I mean, I knew that this was the end.
mhm.
And I think he knew. And at one point, he became very lucid and said, "Thank you for everything you've done for me."
Oh, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah. And I said, and I jumped up. I
Mm,
jumped up because I was by his feet at that point because I was holding him so he wouldn't fall or move. And I jumped up and I ran to him. I mean, ran over to him and
mhm.
I held him and I kissed his forehead and I said, "No, thank you. Thank you for our beautiful life.
Wow,
Thank you for our children. And I love you so much." And that was it. That was his goodbye to me.
wow.
And for the next, I would say, 4 or 5 hours, I just held him and a lot of deep breathing. I said to him, "Craig, you need to go. It's okay." I mean, we had the discussion before. I said, "Honey, I don't think you're gonna, I think this isn't good." "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." He didn't, this was before he yelled at me to get out of the room. He yelled for me to come back into the room.
Mhm,
Um, it was a lot of up and down. I call it kind of the dance, the death
mhm.
dance. you
Yeah.
know. And I saw things I have never seen in my life and what
Mm.
I experienced. I tried to stay very brave and very calm.
Yeah.
And I just held him and I did what I could. And, at the certain point, the breathing was very heavy and then it
Mm.
stopped and then it happened. And then
Mm.
I could tell he was gone.
Mm.
And I held him for 5 hours and I
Wow.
kissed every part that I could of him. And I made my goodbye. I said my goodbyes to him. Um, it was not easy. There's nothing easy about this. And I wish as caregivers we were more prepared. And maybe some people are. Maybe they're, he was home. He was not in a home. I couldn't. When he was originally diagnosed, he said, "Please don't put me in a home." And I knew that if he was going to go back into the hospital one more time, he'd end up in a home
Mm.
because I couldn't physically do it anymore. It was getting very difficult for me. And your brain shuts down when you go through this. And even though I had the will and I had the insurance, I had all this paperwork, I couldn't find it. I couldn't. I said to my daughter, I know I have this. She says, "Mom, you just showed it to me 2 minutes ago." I said, "I did?" I mean, you just don't know. Your whole brain and I would almost say it was so important that I had given a lot of the information to my accountant, and so he had the
Mm.
paperwork. So he said, "No, no, I can send you everything." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much," because I can't remember even the mortuary. I called them, and thank God. I mean, thank God my son said to me, "Mom, pick a place for him that you will make you happy." Because if I hadn't done that, I would have put him in the wrong place. I wasn't happy with my original choice.
Mm.
And so I love where we have, it's a double plot. We're going to be buried together. And, I made the choice to put him in the wall and not the ground because I didn't want my four young children to see their father being buried in the ground. I mean, these were choices I had to make. And, it's, I just actually had this incredible opportunity. The last 4 days, I was asked to be a consultant on a film called Synesthesia, and it's about a caregiver, a deaf caregiver
Mm.
who is a choreographer, and his daughter, who is a dancer, who's also deaf, and their mother, who is not deaf but was just diagnosed with behavioral FTD. And I was on this movie set for 4 days, and there was one point where I had to work with her with the patients with FTD, behavioral
Mm.
FTD, or any FTD. They stuff their mouth, and they pocket their food. And so we worked through this scene. I was really showing her. I mean, I was showing her physically, this is how you put the food in, and this is how you would swallow, and this is, and by the end of the scene, I was hysterical crying. I mean,
Wow.
hysterical. And my sister-in-law was on the set with me, and she said, "My God, it was like your husband was here."
Mm.
And I hope that this film and everything that I'm trying to do and advocate for will teach people,
Mm.
behavioral FTD is scary,
Mm.
and I know there's 3 steps, there's aphasia and there's the Parkinson's, and, um, I if if I hadn't had those videos, I don't know if anyone would believe what happens, with a patient like that. And so I'm really trying to take this whole experience and really advocate for others and bring a purpose to what happened, because this shouldn't have happened. I mean, he was so young, and you know, uh I miss him every day. My grief is very real, as
Mm.
the grief when he was first diagnosed.
Mm. Mhm.
I People will say to me, "Oh, you're so young, you're 50, you have a whole life."
Mm.
I don't personally want to ever take care of another person again. I don't want to go through this. And,
Mm.
I spent the first, I would say, 8 weeks in absolute numbness.
Mm.
And then for about 2 weeks, I felt sadness and depression and crying, and I hated it. I
Mm.
hated it. And I went back to my grief therapist and I said, "I want to be numb. I like numb, and I want to stay busy." And
Mm.
that's where the Dr. Falzarano, sleep study and the Wuggle and being, this being on the film to help, advocate and share our story, is so important for me because I can't see why else this would have happened, you know?
I know, and you're honestly meeting you and seeing how courageous you are
Thank you.
and how your heart connects to so many people, the lives that you will touch. And I
Thank you.
know it's so heartbreaking to have to walk through all of that. I was thinking, as you were sharing about the gift of your family and your
Yeah.
parents and your friends and the
Yeah.
mentor that is beside
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
all of us,
Yeah.
the different
Yeah.
nonprofits that you're so cared for and
Yeah.
supported. And I
Amazing.
just know that you are going to be making a difference in people's
Thank
lives,
you.
and
I
that'll
mean,
live
yeah.
on. Yeah.
No, thank you. I mean, the outpouring, I know, you reached out to me and Dementia Darling and Patty and, Betsy. I mean, everyone, and HFC. I mean, everyone, the beautiful cards that I received, even from the FTD spouse,
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, they became, my resource, when he was first diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, get the weapons out of the house. A car is a weapon, things, you just don't even know, learning about, different medications and well, what's Abilify and what's, trazodone and, all these busporone and it becomes a whole world, and, then my son saying, well, mom, dad can't remember to take his medicine, so let me buy him, you're putting his medicine out, but he keeps on taking the wrong days, or he goes behind my back and takes it. And so, my 12-year-old was like, let me get a medicine machine for you that's automatic and it's locked. And so you kind of like, everybody gives you a piece of everything, whether it's something like on Instagram that you post, or Carrie post, or Dementia Darling post, or Patty, or HFC. It's like you're like, oh, thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone. And I think that that's really, I think, so important here, is that we all know we're not alone in this, even though we feel like we're so alone. I mean, really,
Mm-hmm.
my friends, whether it's from high school or, when I've had children, I have a few who've lost husbands, very kind of abruptly, but nobody has gone through this journey. And people have cancer and they have to watch their loved ones. So, that's where I feel like Wuggle comes in and says, there's a lot of caregivers out there. And we really need to help them and to say, what can we do? Um, and so, that's kind of my mission here, is that Wuggle is going to make a difference, because I have to. I mean,
Yes.
really, and
We turn
I think
that
you feel the same
pain,
way.
yeah, pain into
Yeah,
healing, and
right.
that's
I mean, look what you're doing,
yeah.
I mean, you don't have to be doing this, but you're choosing to help other people, and that's what we do. And so, I would hope that Craig is proud of me, that I'm continuing. I mean, it was hard to share such intimate details, even today, or even on the movie set, which I'm so honored to be a part of, um, and to share this. But I thought, someone's got to do it. Someone needs
Right.
to show the reality of what this is.
Completely. Yeah, it's like you were saying you wish you had known right at the
Oh
end
God.
the what that looks like, how what
Yeah.
you can put in place. For
Yeah.
you, were there things that when you were in this and even now
Hmm.
that were helpful and supportive? I know that I feel like a lot of people move so well intentioned, like,
Yeah.
let me know what I can do. And it's like we
Yeah.
don't even always know how to articulate what we
Yeah.
need.
I
But if
think being
you
able
were
to
to
say help
share,
me.
yeah,
I think being able to say help me is very hard for us. I found, unfortunately, and I mean this in the nicest way,
mhm.
that at the end of the day, when people leave and the door is shut, it's all you.
Mm,
I really do feel that, for me, nobody could do the paperwork.
Yeah.
My sister helped. My sister came to help me do the Social Security disability because that is a that's a
You need the support, yeah.
you need the support on that. And a lot of people have to hire lawyers for that.
Mhm.
And I thought, no, I'm not going to hire a lawyer. We're going to get through this. And I was in tears. I mean, crying to the Social Security disability. What else do you need? I had to go through the whole process again. After going through a Johns Hopkins trained doctor, neurologist, they made me go through their doctors. Do you
Wow.
know how unfair this was to have to put him through all the testing again? And
Mhm.
me and not know what was going to happen. And so I feel
Mhm.
like that should be something we should change. I was the one doing the bills. I was the one doing all the paperwork, the Social Security, long-term disability, the move, everything. Um, and my friends did help me pack the house, and they did, do everything that they could. And so I think you do learn eventually to say, okay, what can I let them do? Right? What can I that isn't going to affect him or me, that's going to be a positive effect. I mean, I do have the guilt of
Mhm.
his last few days because I
Mhm.
wasn't with him and I
Mhm.
was his right hand, caretaker. I mean, I was the one who monitored him. I did everything. So again, it shows you here I am his full-time caregiver. I get sick and this is what happened. So that guilt is definitely there for me. What if I hadn't what if I hadn't had the surgery? What if, I could have been there, those last few days and maybe he
Mhm.
wouldn't have gotten so sick, or
Mhm.
it had such a decline,
Mhm.
right? Because we know that dementia patients, when anything's changed in their schedule, they have a huge decline.
Yeah.
So it was very hard, I did really try to ask for help, but I think in my controlling way, I wanted to make sure he was always okay. And,
Mhm.
and my children were always okay. But yeah, I mean, even sometimes, or my mom would just put a piece of toast out for me.
Mhm.
Andrea, eat. Remember to eat. Have you eaten
Mhm.
today? Have you drank water today? I think most caregivers don't want to eat. I mean, I didn't have really much of an appetite.
Mhm.
I was sad, Food didn't taste very good for me. It was interesting, he passed away almost 3 months ago and um I went by myself to my son's graduation in Boston
Mhm.
and it was just me, my father-in-law, my husband's father had ended up in the hospital and my children couldn't go because they were all in finals and my parents were going to help me watch my younger son. And so I got on an airplane by myself, which I've done before, no big deal. I
Yeah.
went to a hotel by myself. I took the train by myself and I went to the graduation by myself. And it taught me a lot about me.
Mhm.
I'm strong, but it was hard. I was expecting Craig to call. I was expecting him to say, "Where's my dinner?" Every day at 1:30, "Where's my dinner?" I need, breakfast. I need this. And so that phone calls aren't there anymore. As we all know, dementia patients can call 25 times in a row. So, but there was one point in the graduation where my husband was actually in the same place basically 30 years before. And I realized that when they were calling out the different groups, and that was the hardest part for me. That wow, number one, he's not here, and this is where he was 30 years ago. And so, there's a lot of I think for our physical sense, we should ask for more help. I really do think that. But I think we really do try to take on the role of we can do everything.
Completely.
Yeah.
And there is an example, right, of how you were sharing about starting Wuggle and
Yeah.
needing to support caregivers because
Hmm.
their health often
Yeah.
declines more rapidly.
Yeah.
I wanted you to touch on a term where it's that DTP, the deep touch pressure,
Oh, yeah.
of
Yeah.
how healing that can be, right? And just even
Yeah.
what happens to our bodies when we have, right, we need to like lower our cortisol
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Just how vital and what's so cool. I love learning from people the immense highlight of how sleep is truly
So important.
instrumental in our longevity, in preventing
Hmm.
dementia,
Hmm.
in giving us right health and
Yeah.
restoration and all of that.
Yeah. So, I think this all really stems back to when, and I'll talk about the sleep with Wuggle, is that my husband was a doctor.
Mhm.
And so he didn't sleep. When I tell you he was on
Interesting.
call so much that I feel that part of this illness was because he didn't get the sleep he needed. Really
Wow.
do truly feel that. And,
Right.
I'll argue with my 15-year-old son, you need your sleep. You don't understand how important sleep is. And,
Mm.
you can get sick. And so that's why for Wuggle, it is so important to sleep and it's vital to our bodies. I mean, it's what we need. And so when we designed the Wuggle, and it's a sleep cap, and then we have a patent band that goes across, and the way we designed it, um, when we designed it, I didn't even realize, and I was speaking to a woman who does works with trauma and grief, and
Mm.
she said, you have designed it where the deep touch pressure is on your frontal temporal lobe, which
Wow.
is where our anxiety and our stress comes from.
Yeah.
So we're giving that gentle pressure to calm our whole nervous system. And then the band gives you a little extra pressure over your eyes, which in Chinese medicine with the acupuncture, there's a pressure points. And then with the lavender rice
Mm.
insert, which you could go hot or cold, that is for that extra pressure where if you have a migraine or a headache is starting, and you can put it in the front, or you can move it up to, the band moves so you can move the whole thing up to your forehead. Or I
Right.
get migraines in the back of my neck, so I turn the whole Wuggle around and I
Ah.
get the band and the insert, the heat in the back. So I designed it to be very sensitive to everyone's needs. Um, I cannot sleep without it. My son, my all my children sleep with it. They're like, "Oh my God, I need my Wuggle." When we were evacuated for the fire, my kids were like, "You have our Wuggles, right? Everyone has our." I guess I have Wuggles. We've gotten people who call us from New York who say, "I suffer from migraines. This has been a game changer for me." We have
Amazing.
a young lady who has neurological issues, and her eyes have rapid movement, and her mom puts on the Wuggle at night to calm her eyes down. I had a young man who was 27 years old. I met him. His mother had bought him the Wuggle, and I was meeting her to give her some. She bought three, and she wanted another two for her friends. And he says, "Oh, are you Andrea?" And I said, "Yes." And he starts crying. And he says, "I suffer from anxiety and depression." And he says, "I put my Wuggle on every morning for 2 hours, and it calms my brain, and the deep touch pressure helps me to regulate myself."
Incredible.
Right? So there's all these stories where your just heart burst. And I'm like, oh my God, we've got to get this out there. We've got to help people, not just the caregivers, but the people with anxiety and stress and,
Mhm.
ADHD. And,
Mhm.
the little 8-year-old boy suffers from migraines, the where you have the light, the flashing.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so his mom bought them for him, and it's been life changing. And we're actually, my sister Hillary and Talia are writing a children's book, a Wuggle children's book.
Oh,
And so we're going to try to see if we can maybe even get it into hospitals for children.
mhm.
Like, they're scared, right? They're in the hospital. What can we do? And, and partner with in that sense, and even the parents and stuff. So, I think that for me, the deep touch pressure, the calming is so important for our bodies to
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
Um, and it's also our cue to say, hey,
Mhm.
I'm done.
Yeah.
This is my Wuggle time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn off, I'm putting it on. And the great thing is you can't see light, and you can't see your phone, right? Which
So
is like we're
true.
so bad. We're always checking our phone at night. So, you know, it's been a game changer, I think, for so many people. And I feel very blessed in the sense that um, this came to me. am that I have a partner, my sister who is just ready to do this with me, and she, herself was like, oh, I don't think I would wear it. And guess what? She wears it now every night. I mean, people go, oh, let me try it. And so it's been a journey. I think we took great care in making sure that the product itself was soft, and we have a silk bag that it comes in that like
Oh, it's
represents.
beautiful.
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
mine and I
yeah,
love it. And it's
yeah.
packaged so beautifully, and you
Thank you.
just feel so cared for.
Right, right.
Leave it. And you know what?
Yeah,
So you were talking about how before you had created it, that you would like put a blanket over your head and kind of wrap it
yeah.
up. That is what did. Like
Right,
every night I like had to
right.
have, it was something about the pressure on my
Yeah,
head.
yeah,
And
no. And then
then
you're dripping
learning about it.
sweat,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yes. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so amazing and I love it. Yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah, and
just
and
love
it's
that
great
piece.
too because as we get older too, or let's going through menopause and our hormones are
Mhm.
changing. I
Mhm.
was very sensitive to that because I was dripping sweat with these pillows over my head and the blanket, and I thought, what's going on? And it turned out you shouldn't really be putting pillows and blankets
So
over your
smart.
head. And so I don't sweat at all. I mean, it's very breathable. It's very silky. I actually get more compliments on my hair now. Like they'll be like, "Oh, your hair looks good." I'm
Oh.
thinking, "Oh, I just took off my
Thank
Wuggle. Why, thank
Yeah,
you."
it's like a little
Right,
juice. Yeah.
right, right, right. Because it's kind of like a silky, fab.
Mhm.
It's like it has that micro model, which is kind of similar to like a bamboo and stuff. So,
Mhm.
again, I think the packaging was really important. That when somebody, especially a caregiver, opens
Mhm.
up their package, their Wuggle package, I include a note in every single. I've written almost 600 notes.
Mhm.
I write to everybody of encouragement and letting them know that their relaxation, their
Mhm.
calmness, and their sleep is so important to us.
Yeah.
And I want them to feel loved. I want them to open this up and say, "Oh, wow, I have a note. They care about me. The packaging is very caring." And made and let them know that they're special. Everyone is special, and everyone deserves their sleep, and so that's our role, to continue that message.
It's so true. It's so true. Before we close, and I'm going to
Sure.
have you also share where we can direct people to the
Oh,
Wuggle
yeah.
and the work that you're doing, I want you to tell us, for every caregiver listening right now,
Yeah.
what's something to hold on to in their
Mm,
hardest moment? What would you share with them?
gosh. What to hold on to? You're gonna be okay. You are so strong, and I know, like, being in that survival mode is so important to get through this. Let people in as much as you can. I know it's really, really hard. Um, and find ways to just take care of yourself, love yourself.
Mhm.
Um, you know, one day, your loved one won't be here. And I look back and I don't have regrets because I love that man until the day he died.
Mhm.
And I did everything right for him. And I think that that's important for caregivers to know is do what you can, but don't kill yourself in the process.
Mhm.
And that was I had a turning point 2 years ago where I said, I need to survive this. I
Mhm.
need to get through this. I have 4 children.
Mhm.
They need me. They're not going to have their father forever. So
Mhm.
pull yourself together and figure out a way to get through this.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we just have to stay really strong and turn to community.
Yeah.
Our community is so amazing.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
There is only a kind of wisdom that emerges when you walk through the fire, which is
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
what you,
It's a blaze, honey. It's a
there's
blaze.
a blaze,
It's
right?
a
That
blaze.
brings so much compassion and the comfort that you bring to others, the connection that you bring to
Thank you.
others. And I just am here for you and the work that you're doing. And I'm
Thank you.
honored to like have
Thank
you
you.
a part of my community and be able to share about um,
Thank
you
you.
and your work and your story. So where can people connect
Yeah,
with
so
you
you
and
can
learn
go on our
more?
website, which is www.wuggleme, so WUGGLEME.com, Wuggle We also have an Instagram, which is at Wuggle. We also have Facebook, Wuggle. And honestly, anyone can DM me on the Instagram. I will write back. If they have a question about sizing, if they can't, maybe they're having hardship and they can't, the Wuggles, we try to make it very affordable at 39.99. We give back 10%. We always give a 10% discount. Sometimes we do even more depending on like what we're doing, what month it is or whatever. And then we always give back to the nonprofits.
Mhm.
And so that's really important. So, anyone can reach out to me, whether they need advice, whether they just need a friend, whether they want to Wuggle. I mean, whether they want to be a part of the Falzarano caregiver study.
Mm,
I mean, I've reached out to people I know who are Wugglers and I've said, hey, if you want to be a part of the study, or friends who want to be a part of the study,
mhm,
let's honor them, let's connect with them and stuff. So
mm,
yeah, so anyone, we're here for to support this community, just as you are and everybody who's
mm.
part of this. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I'm excited. I want to be able to one day, my dream is to actually have a nonprofit
Mm,
that we can give grants, big grants out, like really big grants, because I have to tell you, I know how hard this is. And I got a grant from Betsy Hall from Further Thoughts in almost 4 years ago when this
mm,
started, or 3 years ago, and it was $1,000 grant, and it felt like $1 million to me.
mm,
And I'll never forget that. And I want to give back in that sense too. And I don't
incredible.
want people to lose their home or not be able to pay for medication or therapy or a caregiver,
Mm,
just like all these other nonprofits are doing. I want to work with them and, and continue to support that.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And
Thank you, Nicole.
it's gonna happen. We'll
It
just
will happen. Yes, of
put
course.
that into the world. It's that I
Yeah.
was just talking to someone about this the other day. The book by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big
Yes.
Magic.
Yes.
And she talks about how these ideas are inside of us that have to be out into the world.
Sure.
And just to see that happen. So
Yeah.
I know it.
Putting
I
out
know
there,
it.
right, right. The
I
mantra, right?
know
Good,
it.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
thank you. It's
Thank
just
you.
an honor again to have you share your story and that I can just hold space while
Yeah.
you share was
Thank
just
you.
really special for me.
Well,
So thank
thank
you.
you. No, thank you. And this
Mhm.
was my first time publicly really speaking about his passing. So thank you for honoring that.
Mhm.
And I hope I can help other people.
Absolutely. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you,
Yeah.
Nicole. I look forward to hopefully getting to see you
I
in
know.
person.
One of these days, we're
One
going to
day.
make it
One day.
happen. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.